set for other people, and you've taken people to higher levels
Thank
than
you.
they
Wow.
might ever. Well, you know it's
Imagine
true.
it could have gone.
I know these things. So first of all, I want to start with what's going on now. You have so many things going on, but let's talk about the film first.
Well, I have this beautiful, I think it's beautiful, documentary, which will debut in the spring of 2018. The title of the documentary is not my title, it's a good one. It's called The Gospel According to André. And the director, Kate Novak, came up with that title, and it was a totally different direction from which she began, and it's quite appropriate. And we opened at the Toronto International Film Festival in September, where I went to Toronto for 5 days, and it was an incredible experience. And of course, the opening night, there was a Grace Jones film, which was on Thursday, and my film opened on Friday, and I think there must have been like maybe 300 films in about 2 weeks. And Toronto is just taken over by filmmakers and movie stars. Right. Jennifer Lawrence was there. Jake Gyllenhaal was there. Nicole Kidman was there. Grace Jones was there. I mean, it was just amazing. It was a great experience. And I think my film was well received. And we already had distribution. We went to Toronto, and Kate had sold it to Magnolia Pictures, so it will go into major theaters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And you're in it, and I'm proud to say that you're in it. And it was one of the best, funnier pieces, one of the funniest lines you ever said about something in the 70s. And it just traces my life. And so that's I'm looking forward to. And I just came back from Houston, Texas, where I curated the second or third show on Oscar de la Renta since he died at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. Wow. And that took a year's work, and it's well received. It's in a very elegant museum. There are about 80 dresses. And I did one in San Francisco last year. Yeah, and I'm going to do one in Charlotte in February of next year, which is a part of, it's aligned to the one in Houston. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to Raleigh, North Carolina next week to give a talk in the Raleigh State Museum because they acquired 50 major examples of the late Eunice Johnson's collection of the Ebony Fashion Fair.
Really?
So it's historical. I accepted the invitation to go talk because it's quite historically important that somehow they got 50 perfect examples of this great lady, Eunice Johnson, who used to go around and buying fashion. I'm sure she bought pieces of yours from the fashion fair. And they've got in the museum Yves Saint Laurent, some of the great couture dresses, Paco Rabanne, Stephen Burrows, just amazing things and just unique. She sought for unique pieces. So I thought it was very important to go there and just be a part of that conversation next weekend. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's nice.
And that's what I'm doing right now.
So Ian just launched his Studio 54 book.
Oh, yes.
And there are pictures of you in the book.
Yes.
Have you seen them?
Yes, I have, and I love them.
I love them.
I love them.
And when I saw them, I said, that's the first André.
Yes.
That was the boy I
yes.
met.
Yes.
Who was just on the verge of really just exploding and just really picking all the energy of the fashion world. And you can see in those pictures, you see that boy and you see just the excitement and the energy that you've always had, but you see the beginning of it there.
Well, it's wonderful. I love the book, and I have to say I love Studio 54. I love the photographs of me throwing Donna Ross up and down. By the way, they got into the documentary, and I think those are Roxanne Lowitt pictures.
Yeah, I think so.
And I just can't imagine if those pictures. I know that W printed it a long time ago, but this just happened spontaneously. And then there are pictures of me with Malone Picasso at a party at 54. Yeah. All of that, 54, when I got to New York in the 74, 54 had not opened, but when 54 opened, you were there almost every night. I would say 4 nights a week, if not 5 or 6. Sometimes I didn't go to weekends, but it was at the center of everything. Mm-hmm. The melting pot of the culture of New York. The 70s were very exciting because you could go to Studio 54 and you would meet anyone and everyone from Madame Trudeau, the wife of the Prime Minister, to Liza Minnelli, to Halston, Martha Graham, Nan Kempner, Yves Saint Laurent would come into New York for a party.
Michael Jackson.
Brooke Shields, Karl Lagerfeld, everyone went through past 54. And it was a very, very exciting time. The music was exciting, the atmosphere was exciting. And I used to go, by the time Studio 54 opened, I had moved to Paris to work for Women's Wear Daily. And then I would come back in the summer to spend the month of August in New York. And I remember going up to 54 in the summertime. I would go every night with Dionne von Furstenberg because I was staying at her house, I think, up on Fifth Avenue. And we would just get in her car and just go down to 54. We ended up there, always after dinner. And then I always managed to get up and go to work.
Everybody did.
Yes,
Everybody did.
Yeah, nobody thinks.
My entire staff, because of my relationship with Ian, my staff was there every night.
Every night.
And it's hard to believe that they would be there all night long and come in the morning and be more productive than any other staff I've ever had.
And by the way, I would stay there until the middle of the night and then go home, shower, and dress to go to work. And be in the office by 9:30, 9:15.
Incredible.
And you know what it was? I lived by Women's Wear Daily. I lived on 12th Street when I first moved to New York. And Women's Wear Daily 14th Street and Women's Wear Daily was on 12th Street. So I just had to walk to work. So I just dashed in the shower and got to work. But there has never been and never will be anything like Studio 54. I don't think, you can't replicate it. They try to redo things like Will and Grace.
Yeah.
And
no, you do it once and
that's it. And the memory stays there. The book is glorious. The book is really beautiful. It's a testament to what happened and to a cultural phenomenon in New York City that was known around the world. And people came to New York to go to 54.
Right. So it was, you touched on this before, it was the 70s. And the 70s, if I think about it, were probably the most, and Ian swears that he believes this strongly, and I believe it too, and I'm anxious to hear your thoughts. The 70s in New York were the most creative time. I think it was the peak of fashion in that it was the explosive personality of the fashion industry really reached heights.
Absolutely.
And the gay culture was just finally, all of that energy was coming out, and every store window, everything. There was creativity everywhere.
Everywhere you went, there was creativity. You went, fashion just exploded because there was suddenly the awareness that fashion people were important, and the world of fashion, television has never picked up fashion the way it did in the 70s with Elsa Clinch. Elsa Clinch
You're so right. You're so right.
Television, look where we are today. With all the crap on TV, the housewives of this and the housewives of that, of California and LA and Atlanta, no one has ever picked up how to do fashion. Elsa Clinch went around the world.
You need to do it.
So people just are afraid. People are afraid, so afraid. Because people now only want to talk about the bottom line, the dollars. People were creative. New York was smaller then. Of course, it was smaller. But everyone, you were important as well as Halston. And you worked right down the street from Halston, right?
Yeah.
You worked right up the street from Halston, down the street. You were right on the same block.
Yeah.
But if you went to Halston, you also had to go see what Norma Kamali was doing. Everything was important. Giorgio Sant'Angelo was important. And the Vogue, although Mrs. Riddle had not gone, she left her mark on Vogue when she left. Because somehow it still carried on that kind of energy. Yeah. Warhol carried on the energy. Yeah. Warhol was great. Going to the factory. Yes, everywhere. Taking pictures, going everywhere, snapping. Warhol would go to the opening of a party in the subway as well as on Fifth Avenue or St. Regis or the private clubs, and that was so great about Andy. Andy was a very, very important catalyst to me. Yeah. He just embraced everything, embraced the culture. He embraced Jean-Michel Basquiat, who thought he would become a famous artist. And everybody just walked through Warhol's studio. They walked through Halston. They walked through 54. You were dressing people. You were making swimsuits for the great, she's now gone, what's her name? Farrah Fawcett, which were very important. The swimsuit on the cover with Farrah Fawcett. She was a pinup girl. And I just don't think that somehow the energy hasn't been the same. I miss the energy of
it's
the
a
70s.
different. Well, I think, like you said, you can't redo Will and Grace. You can't redo Studio 54 because it's all of the dynamic of the culture, of
and the
the
people who made the
socioeconomic
culture.
time.
Yes.
I think the fact that the 70s were the beginning of the women's movement,
Yes.
the beginning
Yes.
of the gay culture.
Gay culture. Beginning of the gay culture.
And especially everybody who's a little different came to New York.
Yes.
We all knew we were different,
Yes.
and there was a connection there.
A connection,
and a
total
creative
connection. A creative connection.
That was unbelievable.
And everyone absolutely had total vibrancy and moved in the same circles. You didn't question. People didn't judge you. You just came. You were not judged. You were not judged. There was a great Antonio. You know, there's a documentary on him now. It's apparently very
great.
It's in theaters now.
Yeah.
I mean, Antonio had just moved back to New York from Paris, and Juan, and they would just had their own little universe of style and illustration and creativity. And then there was also, you know, although he's gone, he's a great, great, great person. He is an institution, although he died. Bill Cunningham.
Yeah.
He just recorded people on the street.
Every day.
Street style was important.
Every day.
Yes.
Every day
Absolutely.
of his life.
Every his life he was recording
a photograph.
people. For someone, something he found in someone, whatever his eye caught became a trend on his pages.
Yeah.
And he was a great man. He's greatly missed.
Yeah.
And he was fantastic. And he would just embrace the young people. I mean, he embraced Olivero Toscani would come, you know, before Benetton, everything, FIT, everything. And then Isabel and Ruben Toledo, you know, although they're unsung heroes, they're quietly still making fashion in their fabulous studio, and they're incredible. True artists. Yeah. True masters of what they do.
Yeah.
Isabel is a master of cut, and he is a master artist. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, he has unique style, and they are a couple that they've stayed together. They have no children, which is, I think, a great choice. And they just live for their art, and they live for the wonders. And so you have that. And so these people have found their way through the 70s and still survive, as you. Yeah. Your store, I looked at the things you had downstairs. I always see such modernity, and the moment is that you have captured clothes. You got down there a tailored jacket with this tulle, the Affinis tulle skirt with a body under it. It's not that far from what you were doing in the 70s, you know? It's not that far, but it's a line, but it's you. And you know, the transparency is there. Yeah. But it's not that far from what you did. I will never forget when I went to Marisa Berenson's wedding in Thanksgiving. I think it might have been 77. Anyway, Marisa Berenson was getting married in the Hollywood, and ABC actually filmed it. And she was dressed by Valentino, and Valentino was there, and her bridesmaids were Marisa Berenson. I know she was Marisa. Her bridesmaid was Barry Berenson.
Barry Berenson, yeah.
And Dion van Furstenberg. And maybe some other people. I don't know. But the bridesmaids wore what they wanted to wear. And I will never forget that Dion van Furstenberg chose one of your red velvet gypsy skirts that wrapped around the waist, like a ballet dancer, like a dancer's skirt, with a maillot de bain, with a body, a black body, and crossed her legs in Charles Jourdain shoes. And that was the style moment. I mean, there was Dion van Furstenberg with a closet full of crazy, wacky clothes of her own. And that's what she chose to wear as a bridesmaid. Yeah. And it was a very posh wedding in a very... Marisa Berenson had decorated their house just for the wedding. And there was ABC filming it, and that's what style was then, you know?
Yeah.
Valentino meets Norma Kamali meets Yves Saint Laurent meets, you know, Fabrice. Fabrice was a great person.
Yeah.
All these people were very important in the world of fashion. And they moved in the same circles, and there was room for everyone. Now, I think the media has just clamps down and thinks that certain people probably have seen their day, unless they're big people like Dior, big houses with money. But there's always style around the corner at some place, you know. You always have to look for style. And one of your most incredible clients for me was Mika Erdogan, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I will never forget that Mika Erdogan, one winter after the Met Ball, we would always end up at 54 after the Met Ball. It was then held in December. And Mika, of course, was the wife of Ahmed Ertegun, and she came to 54. We were standing around, you know, at the bar having drinks. And it was very dark, and I couldn't see, but I knew she was very well dressed. And I said, Mika, what on earth are you wearing? Did you get that in Madame Gray? When did you order that? Because then those kind of women always went to Paris.
Right.
And so Mika Erdogan's friends were all in their Saint Laurent, Lynn White, Nan Kepner, in the big Saint Laurent.
That you've done through the years, and your writing is just so incredible. Not only did people get everything from you and everything that you reflected out through the magazines you work for, but your ability to change the dynamic of a designer and the way they're understood in context of, like you just did for me.
Yes.
But you've done that for so many designers. And why? What inspires you about that? When do you know that you see something that needs to be?
It's instinct and it's intuitive. It's a great pleasure to have that kind of respect from any designer. And just so many designers. I mean, we go up and down, in and out, you know. It's intuitive. When I would come to you and see you sewing up on your second floor with these boxes of industrial needles, breaking the needles with the silk parachutes that were recycled. That wasn't intuitive. I knew then there was a moment, and it had to be embraced by Women's Wear Daily. Because I walked up there, you were hovering over there, breaking needles with boxes of silk recycled parachute. And then you had the silk parachutes, and they ended up in Mrs. Vreeland's show at the Met. And it's a eureka moment. It's a process of personalities. You somehow must connect, and you must feel that what you're seeing is very important in the terms of the craft. And you must walk in, and you must respect the designer and listen to the designer. I've had it with you. I've had it with Yves Saint Laurent, Karl Lagerfeld, Miuccia Prada. I remember once I went to see Miuccia Prada. I had to fly from Paris to Milan to meet her. I had just gotten to Vogue and was living in Paris and working on Vogue. And I had to fly down to Milan just to meet Miuccia Prada. It wasn't a season of shows. I had to go meet her to introduce myself to her. And it was a 4:30 appointment on a weekday. And I had to go to one of her offices. She had many buildings around Milan. And she was sitting there, and she was wearing a yellow V-neck cashmere sweater, a brown suede skirt, and she had golf shoes with the tongue, but the golf shoes had the cleats still implanted in the sole. And on her head was a coral and diamond tiara from Fred Lane.
I love this.
4:30 p.m.
I love this.
And she's sitting there with an assistant in a little salon with little espresso.
I love it.
And this was the moment. I mean, this was probably into her maybe 5th season. Really? And I just thought, golf cleats, golf shoes with the cleats. Not only is she wearing them, and she probably had them on her line, but she just put them on and they had cleats.
I love it.
And a coral tiara. And that's how our relationship began. Miuccia and I had a strong, very strong relationship. Yves Saint Laurent, you don't know how many days I think of him. I mean, Mr. Berger just died. You know how often I think of him. And, you know, when he died, Saint Laurent, it was almost, how can I say it? It was like you realized that the era was over.
Oh, totally.
Over. Totally. Yves Saint Laurent just did so much for fashion. And so Yves Saint Laurent he didn't say many words, but he would just mumble something. But it wasn't what he said, it was what he did. So you'd go to see him, and it was like going to church. Like, the appointment was made, and you had to put on your best suit and go up to the Avenue Marceau and be received by, grand ladies and fabulous jersey dresses and taken upstairs to the Salon Atelier to see the clothes. And there would not be much talk, to be very quiet. But Eve would, but he would touch the bow. It's when he went to tie the bow or touch the fabric, you looked at his hands and his fingers, and the way he treated that bow was like it was the most important thing in the world. Yeah. And the way he could tie a bow was amazing. I've seen 2 men do that. It was Yves Saint Laurent and Oscar de la Renta. The bow was caressed. It was almost like a woman's body. Yeah. And that bow became so significant, and you see that. And then John Galliano, oh God. He's a visionary, he's a poet. John Galliano, he is one of the greatest. And I had not known John Galliano, But I was in Paris, and one of my friends says, well, you have to go to this John Galliano show. And I said, what? Well, you have to go and see it. You don't know it's a real thing. He's from London. And he was there living in London and showing. And this friend of mine, her name was Emmanuelle Alt. She was now has since was the editor of French Vogue, which maybe still is French Vogue. She says, you have to go see this, really fabulous. You will love it. You will love it. You will love it. And so I go to the John Galliano show, and they are showing slim dresses, but they're just that much dress. Before, if you cross your legs, you go, up, commando. And then they had huge 18th century Joshua Reynolds hats on. These enormous hats and that much of a dress and high heels from Manolo Blahnik. But at the end of the show, they had a pillow fight on the stage. They just came out, and these feathers from pillows were just flying, the whole thing. It was just magical. So cool. And then one night from Milan, we were coming from the collections of Milan, and Anna and I would take the plane together, and then she would go to the Ritz, and then I would go in the car, take the car, and just go to John, because it was like 10 o'clock at night. And John was in an atelier, very small, working on a collection. And he had it was almost like the 19th century. He had a little Bunsen burner in the corner, and they were warming up, chili out of a can. But in the other corner, they had the most amazing, big, extravagant crinoline. It was an enormous big hoop that they were constructing to make these big crinoline skirts. But the crinoline was made out of electrical wiring that he got at Galerie Lafayette. Hoops, they have these bones and stays, but he had the electrical wiring tubes and made it lighter. So when you put the fabric over the crinoline was really light. It wasn't like the 19th century. So when the girl came in the runway, the thing went up and down, flew up and down. It was musical. Yeah. And I knew that collection was going to be an extraordinary collection. I went back and I said to Anna, this Galliano collection is going to be the defining moment for the season. Yeah. And it was a true, brilliant collection. It was called the Russian Tsarinas Escaping the Revolution, going through Scotland and ending up at Ascot in the 30s. And that show was the moment we realized that Galliano was fabulous. Now, I had met Galliano before in the early 60s. No, in the early 70s, I'd gone to London for the London Fashion Week, and Galliano was living with Jasper Conrad. And he just got out of school. And they were lovers, and they dressed like little Lord Fauntleroy. So Manolo Blahnik and I, who've always been close friends, we were in a party. I said, who are these people? Who are these two boys dressed like little Lord Fauntleroy? Little Bermuda shorts and little white frilly blouses and black velvet jackets and knee socks and patterned shoes. And he said, oh, that's John Galliano and Jasper Conrad, and they're lovers. And then we went to a Jasper Conrad dinner at his home. And this was the biggest disaster in my life. So Jasper Conrad served fish on a Sunday night in London. On Monday afternoon, I was Linda Blair. I was so sick of that fish. I was Linda Blair. It was like an exorcist. And the whole thing, and it was from the fish, because you don't serve fish on Sunday night.
Because it's old.
Old, it's from. I had never been that sick. And I was in Manolo's store. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I felt it coming up. And I felt it. It was like a volcano that's erupting inside. And I knew to run to the street. And it just came up like, it came in an arc. An arc of green vomit. And I said, thank God, Manolo, I didn't vomit in your store. You would never spoken to me again. And his sister said, I'm so glad you did not vomit because the carpet is huge. So I had to go downstairs in the basement and get the bucket and hot water and clean up the sidewalk.
Oh, my God.
But those are my Galliano stories.
That's hysterical.
And John and I didn't see each other until he got to Paris and was living in Paris and did that collection. And then he had this fabulous collection. And then I called him one day and he said, I'm sleeping on the floor of Stephen Robinson's house. I don't have a back room anymore because Plan Sud had backed him. And then they had their great show and he wasn't going to produce the collection. I said, what, you lost a backer? Who is your backer? And this jerk, Plan Sud, the owner, had decided not to back John. And John was sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag.
Oh, my God.
And I said to Anna, this is not possible. This cannot be. And fortunately, John, Anna sent John a ticket to come to New York for Thanksgiving. And we had a dinner. I had a dinner party at Mortimer's. And I introduced him to some people at Payne Weber. And his name was John Bolt. And John's came to the dinner party. It was the year of Schindler's List. And he sat down, and Iman was there wearing her fabulous Isina Laya dress. And she sat with the gloves. She sat eating with the gloves on. I remember that. And then the man said to me, do you think that I should be backing John Galliano? I said, yes. So I flew back to Paris, and this man, John Booth, came on a Friday afternoon on the Concorde,
Wow.
met with John and myself in the lobby hotel, and he said, well, we would like to back you. How much money do you need? And John just didn't even...
He doesn't know, right?
He just trembling. He didn't know what we were talking about because he was sleeping on the floor. He just was trying to survive. I said, John, we've got to give you a comeback. You cannot miss a season. You cannot skip 2 seasons and go back.
Yeah.
This man will give us money. How much money do you need? Because money is his thing. And so then Mr. Booth went back to New York and came back next Saturday. And we had phone conversations. I said, John, give us a figure. How can we do a show? How much money do you need to put on the show? He said, maybe $50,000. I said, okay, he needs $50,000 for a show. And Mr. Booth came back to Paris and said, we'll give you $50,000 to go to my lawyer, and anytime you need the money, just take it out. He'll give you a thing, a sheet, $10,000 or whatever, and you just do the show if you need 50. And John Booth gave John Galliano $50,000, and that's how he got back on his feet.
Wow.
And then he was doing a show, 17 pieces, and the show, we said, well, we need a venue. We need to have some place to go for the show. And I was devoting my life to going to find a place. We went all over Paris looking at all the buildings and everything. And I said, John, maybe we can show it them on the Bismarck Foundation. We went there. Yeah, that's kind of nice. Maybe the Islamic Museum. And then it came to me. My late great friend, Sarah Schlumberger, who was an art patron, a friend of Andy Warhol, very wealthy, Schlumberger Oil, had moved from her house, her hotel, particularly was historical, on the left bank on Rue Ferrou to a big house on the right bank. And that house was empty. And I said, oh my God, this is going to be perfect for John because it's a big house with 3 floors and they can just snake themselves down from the 3rd floor into the salons, 17 looks, and that would be incredible. And we could have 2 shows, one at 9:30 and one at 11:30. So with Amanda Hollick, myself, John, and Stephen Robinson, we put that whole thing together in less than 2 weeks. And John had the clothes, he was sewing the clothes. Even to the day of the show, they were in one of the salons, pinning Kate Moss in the final dress. And the dress came out unsewn because he was just that creative. And so we booked the models, so models did it for free. Naomi Campbell, Linda Evangelista, Kate Moss, Manolo did the shoes for free.
Awesome.
The diamonds were real from Harry Winston, Boucheron, Buccellati, Cartier, all the jewelers in Paris gave the diamonds for free, loaned the diamonds. And up on Madame Schlumberger's 4th floor were all the security guards from all the jewelers.
Right, I'm sure.
Pinning on, Cartier 1929, Boucheron 1949, Belle Pavon, F-17 looks. And that was a really major moment in fashion.
Wow.
And Anna embraced it, and Anna came in her Chanel suit, and she embraced it, and we had two shows, one at 9:30 and one at 11:30. The 9:30 we put the buyers, and then the 11:30 was the big show with the friends and the socialites. And I remember when we took Sal to lunch, I took Sal to lunch and I said, Sal, we have a favor we want to ask you. And we just have to ask you right away. Can we use your old house for a fashion show? Because she still owned it. She said, absolutely. I just have to go get it. My facelift. I have a few of my ideas. I'll be happy. And so Sal was thrilled because she sat there in the middle of the grand salon as the dame of, she provided this thing. And that's what fashion is. Yeah. You have to help people. You have to embrace. So my role is coffee, tea, or me. It's better than an airline attendant or airline steward, but you've got to help and support and embrace people. Yeah. You've got to enthuse and encourage. And that's what I've done today. And I also did it with Carl, but in another kind of way. Carl would just even have conversations, and Oscar. It wouldn't be, you just sit there and have a conversation like with you. It's not necessarily you're going to talk about, well, that should be a bias dress or with a bow. It becomes a language of style and the same things and the same interests, and gossip. Yeah. What are they doing over there so long? That old dusty outfit, and it'd be funny. And, Carl and I were like that. And he would just sit there and he would say, what do you think? What do you think? He was sitting, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And you just have to learn to follow the language of the person. Yeah. And I know when I first met Karl Lagerfeld was with Andy Warhol.
Oh, really?
Yes. Andy said we're going to do the Paris issue of Interview. And Antonio's going to be the guest editor. And you're going to do the interview with Karl Lagerfeld. And this was in May of 1975. This was my first big interview in Interview magazine. My first big fashion interview was with Marc Bohan of Dior, and then took the model the dress. So then comes Karl Lagerfeld. So I have read everything I could possibly read about Karl Lagerfeld, what he was interested in, and all of that. So I run to the Sunday afternoon. We go to tea. Andy and the entire entourage, Andy and Fred Hughes, Bob Colacello, all the people, into the suite of Karl Lagerfeld, who has his own entourage, posse of people that have come from Paris. So it's a Sunday afternoon, so it's a full on in the suite of Karl Lagerfeld. And then we have to sit down and do the interview. And while I'm interviewing him, Antonio sketches. And there's a famous sketch where I'm sitting there, skinny as a bean, a string bean, talking to Karl, and Karl's got on the dark glasses and a beard, and his other friends from Paris. And we're talking about the 18th century. And that interview was done in front of Andy, and then it was printed. And so Karl and I became friends instantly. I had not met Karl Lagerfeld until that point.
Really?
I knew who he was. I knew how important Chloe was. I followed the Chloe collections. He came to New York, and then we became friends instantly. Instantly, with just nothing. And by the time that interview came out, I was already at Women's Wear Daily, because I went to Women's Wear Daily in September of '75.
Right.
So the interview came out, and I was already at Women's Wear Daily.
Yeah.
And people at Women's Wear Daily couldn't understand what Karl Lagerfeld saw in me. I was told, one of the great editors says, well, she couldn't understand, why does Karl Lagerfeld see in Andre? Right. He saw more in me than she saw in you, because you would know he was going to Club Set.
Right.
You didn't know anything about Paris, except, this is Karl Lagerfeld. So I knew what Karl Lagerfeld loved, and I knew what he liked, and I knew what he wore. Obsession of silk shirts, his obsession with 18th century furniture. All of that was very important to him. And so we became lifelong friends.
So, so you worked at Women's Wear, and John Fairchild was a force.
Yes, he was.
I
learned
really,
so much from him.
He really transformed fashion. He was a major influence.
Yes.
What are your stories and memories or interactions with him?
He was fabulous. I went to the memorial and I realized what a great man he was. But before I knew him, even came to New York, the one book I read in high school that I loved was The Fashionable Savages. And John Fairchild had written that book.
Yeah.
And it was amazing that he had interviewed Coco Chanel, Marc Bohan, Yves Saint Laurent, and all these people that I wanted to know were in that book. And I never thought that I would meet him and walk into Women's Wear Daily one day, and I was suddenly hired to be an accessories editor. And his desk sat about 20 feet from mine. It was open planning. Everyone sat in an open office, and he would stand over me and scream. And first I walked in, he didn't understand who I was because Michael Cody had hired me. And I arrived wearing Karl Lagerfeld's 3-ply silk crepe shirts and matching scarves and mufflers with Fruit of the Loom t-shirts from Woolworths. So he didn't quite get the look because it wasn't a suit and I was these dashing mufflers. So for about maybe 3 months, he didn't speak to me at all. And then finally he saw that I was on my medal and he started, hello, Andre, how are you? And then he would give me assignments. And then he would then come and stand over my desk. We had typewriters then, and I typed fast. I took typing in high school. He would stand over my desk as I was typing a story. So can you imagine how intimidating it was? Andre, you got, and he just folded his arms and said, Andre, you got to point out that Pat Buckley was wearing a Bill Blass dress the other night. What'd you think of it? And I was learning from him. So slowly, I was getting more assignments. And I was feeling more comfortable with him. And I was really getting most of my plum assignments from him and Michael Cody. And one Christmas, he said, Andre, I'm going away. When I come back, I want you to have edited the whole entire W. The in and out issue.
No.
And that was a test.
No.
He says, you give me the in and out issue. I want to see what you're going to do with the in and out issue. So do all the ends, who was in, who was out. And I said, okay. And I stayed at Christmas and did that. And he came back. He loved it. That was the test. And then that's when I got sent to Paris. And I loved Paris. And the first assignment was to go to do the Saint Laurent collection. January 1978, the Broadway collection, where it was Porgy and Bess and Mooney in the pink suit with the crop pants and the straw boated lacquered silver. And he came, and we went to preview with Eve. He came over to Paris a few days earlier, and we both had to go to the preview together. And I had to put on my best suit and just stand there and listen. And he loved what I wrote. And I would be on a telex machine Then you didn't have no teletext.
I remember that.
Those horrible, bumping, nasty, noisy telex machines. I was so intimidated by the telex machine. But thank God I could type fast. So I would go to the show and come back and write my review on notepads and then put it on the telex machine. Yeah. And he got the first review from the Star Wars collection. He said, "This is fantastic, the Broadway collection." Yeah. And in my documentary, I'm reading from that review. It's part of the documentary. I'm reading from the review that was on the Broadway collection. That was a similar moment in my career. I learned from John Fairchild how to look at clothes and report on them. Yeah. He taught me how to see clothes and analyze them. Yeah. How to report and how to narrate what was important about the details of the collections.
So Diana Vreeland obviously had an incredible impact on how you, just who you are. Well, just who you are.
She was amazing. She taught me the luxury of clothes, the luxury of fashion.
So for people, for a millennial generation that need to know, who was Diana Vreeland?
Well, Diana Vreeland was an incredible fashion editor. She'd worked at the Bazaar for about 20 years, and then she went to Vogue, I think in 61, and then she was dismissed from Vogue in 71. But she really made her impact in the world of fashion because she supported youth, news. She loved anything that was new, anything that was exciting, and anything that had to do with youth. So she was a very disciplined woman, but she had great imagination. So when she was dismissed from Vogue, she got a job at the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Her first show was in 1974 called Romantic and Glamorous Hollywood Design, and that's where she made her mark. And I actually volunteered for that first show. And it was she'd gone to Hollywood, and she dug up all the great clothes. Scarlett O'Hara's portiere dress from Gone with the Wind, Camille's coat from Gerda Garbo's coat from Camille, Mata Hari dresses from Gerda Garbo. Everything was extraordinary, and she taught me the luxury of the clothes. She said, your clothes must be as luxurious inside as they are out. The silk lining of these clothes are important. So there I had a great learning teacher, a master. I've learned from the masters. I've always said I've learned from the masters. I've learned from John Fairchild and Diana Vreeland. And it wasn't so much about, she understood luxury, but she understood glamour. She understood so many things that just came to her in a very unique way. She didn't speak in sentences. She spoke in word messages, one telegraphic word. She spoke in utterances. She approved of things by making utterances. You know, she loved something.
Like what?
You could tell she approved it. She said, and you just, and you just loved it, and you just lived for that. And she was incredible. She also knew the importance of everybody had something to offer. When she did her show called American Women of Style, 10 Women of Great Style of America, she included Elsie de Wolfe, the first lesbian interior decorator. She included Millicent Rogers, who was this wealthy Standard Oil Harris who just had all her clothes made in Mamboche. She ordered clothes from Charles James, you know, the great couturier. And she would order the clothes. It would take him 2 years to make the clothes, and then she put them in storage. She'd order them and she forgot it, and she just didn't want to wear them anymore. And she had really beautiful houses. But then she also did Josephine Baker. It's a great American woman style. She had in the show a Josephine Baker, this little illegitimate love child from St. Louis who took the world by storm. Paris, and she became famous. She went to Paris, Harlem, Josephine Baker. And she said she couldn't get the funding to do the Josephine Baker vignettes the way she wanted to do them. And she said, Andre, I've got to get $7,000 to get this, to put up the Josephine Baker costumes. You got to help me. What can I do? Can't you write to the lady who was head of Ebony Magazine? And I said, well, I don't know Mrs. Johnson, but you can certainly write to her yourself. And I'm sure she will say right away, yes. And she wrote to Mrs. Johnson. She said, do you think it's a good idea? And Mrs. Johnson sent a check for $7,000 instantly.
Really?
Instantly. And Josephine Baker went into the exhibit.
Awesome.
Because they didn't understand how she could, you see, trust people who have a vision. You have to trust John Galliano. It's never going to be wrong. It's like an artist. You can't say Picasso made an ugly painting. Right. You can't say Salvador Dali was wrong. If she saw Josephine Baker as a woman of great style, there was a reason. So the museum, they didn't want to give $7,000 to a black woman in those days. And so she got the clothes that she wanted, and she made a great diorama of Josephine Baker's clothes, and Mrs. Johnson came to the thing and saw it.
Amazing.
And she just had a way of seeing things. She lived in an exotic world, but she lived in a very disciplined world of work.
Yeah.
She worked hard all her life. She gave to so many people. She gave back. She created the careers of Oscar de la Renta and
Really?
Bill Blass. And
Really?
they owed so much to her, and they adored her. Bill Blass was a lifelong friend, and so was Oscar.
Really?
I mean, she just gave so much. She would just call up Oscar and say, I'm thinking Russia, and you have to make a Russian outfit. So he'd make a Dr. Zhivago coat. And she would call up and say, I'm mad for Camille. No, I'm mad for Queen Christina, Garbo and Queen Christina. And they'd make the clothes.
Yeah.
They'd make the clothes in the movie. So she had that kind of relationship, and she was a catalyst, an oracle, a soothsayer, a friend, and a real enthused. She enthused.
Yeah. I mean, it was incredible to me that she even considered
your clothing
for the parachute for the museum. I mean, it was
for Vanity Fair.
Yeah. I mean, I remember her asking about what or telling us what she thought should be in the museum, and I thought, this must be a mistake. She can't really mean that. And then putting it together.
You on the radar. You on her radar.
And then she invited me before the show to meet with her.
Yes.
And it's the two of us alone before the exhibit. And I can't hear because I'm so shell-shocked that I'm there with this woman. And she said things to me, but it was white noise. I couldn't, I was so nervous about it. But what she did in the exhibit with blowing, parachutes, and it was so out of context with the rest of the exhibit. But the vision to have that was just incredible.
And this is what she taught you, because when she had that moment for Josephine Baker, it was the right thing. American Women of Style. I still have the little green catalog, tiny little brochure. Right. I mean, Rita Acosta Leidig was an American woman who got wealth and had her shoes made out of 16th century altar cloths from Venice. And the shoe trees were made by the same man that made Stradivarius violins.
What?
And her shoes were in trunks, in little shoe trunks. And you saw these little shoes made of 17th century lace mounted on black kid skin in the shoe tree, in the trunk, the process, the lace, the trunk, the shoe, the shoe tree. It was amazing. And so therefore she said Josephine Baker. So she knew the balance of up to down, the high low. She understood high low. Yeah. She understood Josephine Baker the way no one understood. And she was criticized when she had the first Saint Laurent show and he was still alive. She was deeply criticized. Yeah. But she also had the 10s, 20s, and 30s when she had Schiaparelli and, the Calosa. I mean, history. She gave history.
Yeah. And those exhibits were really well done, and they were very innovative, and they really opened the door to Anna, who is, she's such a controversial character. Yes. But and I met her, we literally started around the same time, so she was my editor. And I remember this girl coming, and she would say, I'm doing a story on this, and this, and she was working for all different kinds of magazines. And I thought, she really knows what she's doing. And she had a great assistant, and she was dogged and on it. And then you knew right then and there that she was a powerhouse.
Yeah, she was a powerhouse.
And so you work so closely with her, and she's done so much for the fashion industry.
She's done so much for the industry.
And so what do you think is her real force? Where is
her real force is like Avrila, is to embrace, enthuse, and courage and support. She supports fashion. She believes in fashion. She believes in the great talents of fashion. She believes there's always a place for fashion. And as you say, she's dogged. She's a great boss. Sometimes her reputation is miscommunicated in that she's a woman. I always say, if most women were bosses, you wouldn't have people going around with sexual harassment. Anna Wintour's not going to rape or sexually harass somebody.
Right.
The way allegedly Harvey Weinstein did. So you'll never have that problem with her. She may be slightly strident, but she's never going to sexually harass you, which is a good thing. And as a woman, she has pioneered herself into a stratosphere. No other editors have ever been the editor of Vogue for this long. She's done so much for fashion. Remember, she did Fashion's Night Out. She did so much for 7th on Sale. She did so much. She's done, and she's
For
raised
young
so
designers,
much. The young
yeah,
designers, the
supporting,
fashion
yeah.
fund, and she's done so much with the Met. She's raised over $200 million.
Yeah, no, amazing.
Amazing. And that's why she's called Dame now,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
she's been knighted as a Dame.
Yeah.
And her name is on the costume institute because she raised $200 million.
Yeah.
So she has established her legacy, and she will be there for as long as she wants. And she's always been, she totally has a unique way of just maintaining a status quo of power, and at the same time embracing the young designers, helping designers. She single-handedly helped John when he was in that Low Valley.
Yeah.
You know, she helped him work at Oscar de la Renta for one season, and then I think she helped him get the job at Margiela when he was so awfully turned out of the House of Dior.
Yeah,
But apparently now the House of Dior is embracing him again because they put all his clothes from Dior in a great show in Paris now, where his clothes are so outstanding for all the designers who worked at Dior, from Ferré to Bohan to Galliano to Rafe Simmons to the new girl. So she embraces fashion. She embraced. Marc Jacobs would never have a career without Anna Wintour.
No,
he wouldn't have gone to Louis Vuitton. It was she who recommended for Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
And I was at the first Louis Vuitton and his last Louis Vuitton show. In 15 years, that's a long time.
Yeah, that's a very long
stamina and to withstand that kind of pressure.